stakeholders, coaches, governors, and general managers. Those are the people calling all the shots. Many WNBA fans are calling out the referee problem, and they are demanding answers and they are demanding changes. It seems like a lot of them are kind of being told what to do. There are other people pulling the strings above them. What actually happens is that we have a competition committee for stakeholders, coaches, governors, and general managers, and that competition committee is the committee that dictates the state of the game. Officiating in the WNBA became as hot button of an issue as any. Heated debates surrounding the league's physicality dominated the headlines, particularly when Indiana Fever star rookie Caitlin Clark was subject to several intentional fouls. The referees who were refereeing the Fever and Liberty game, that one of the referees seems like his only experience was actually refereeing high school games.
If the WNBA is not rigged, they're doing a great job of making it look like it's rigged. Because if you guys didn't see the referees literally, they made a bad call. And if you guys have ever played sports, you know that like when a referee knows they've screwed up, they will do everything they can to not talk to the players. They are running away from the Indiana Fever players. As you can see, like it's not just Caitlin Clark, it's Sophie Cunningham. And he's like, no, I'm not looking. No. And you know bad refs, because again, I live in a country where there are good refs and the good refs know who they are, but the standard of refereeing is absolutely shocking. And like I've seen referees be talking to coaches, and then mid-conversation, just when they know they're in the wrong, mid-conversation just turn around and start ignoring players. If it wasn't for the fact that the WNBA is a professional sports league. This would be funny if the WNBA was not a pro sports league. Straight up.
The official acknowledged that he was approached during the preseason and informed directly that calls involving Clark were to be closely examined and kept within a physical barrier in a sworn statement given to league investigators. To put it another way, be understanding, particularly if the contact wasn't obvious. The sentence that caused everything to fall apart, however, came next. He said that he received payment for his compliance. This went from a conspiracy to verified corruption, with that one admission. He explained that the money was a bonus linked to game control incentives and that the orders had come from a top executive office, but he did not specify the precise source of the remuneration. When questioned further, he stated that it came with an agreement that I would support the league's preferred management of certain games. Even though the official never mentioned Engelbert by name in that last sentence, the insinuation was so strong that it rocked the league to its core. The NBA's ethics and compliance teams intensified their investigation since Silver was already in charge of it. They were examining more than just Engelbert's correspondence. They were tracking calendar meetings, emails, and funds. What they discovered merely validated the public's pre-existing fears. During the first month of Clark's season, a number of internal memos that recommended discipline in officiating high-profile events and controlling perception to prevent favoritism circulated around the WNBA's top executive tier. It sounded like ordinary league jargon to the typical fan. However, it appeared to investigators to be coded instructions, with sophisticated wording concealing deliberate manipulation. Cathy Engelbert, however, was nowhere to be seen. She turned down requests from the media. She stopped using her social media platforms. One statement was released by her legal team. Commissioner Engelbert apologizes for any wrongdoing and anticipates a thorough and impartial examination of the evidence. However, the verdict was already being formed in the court of public opinion. The players now spoke up more forcefully. Veterans said that they had been aware of the disparity for weeks, but they lacked the confidence to challenge the system. Coaches filed complaints in the past. Reels of missed birds were assembled by footage analyzers and labeled with. According to insiders, the referee at the center of the controversy had provided not just testimony, but evidence, messages, internal memos, communications between officials. In those exchanges, he'd allegedly been told to ease the pressure on certain defenders, avoid overalling contact, and most chillingly, don't make it easy for Clark. It wasn't phrased as outright bribery. It never is. But the implication was apparent. The game was never called straight. And that wasn't a mistake. It was a directive. At the heart of it all sat Cathy Engelbert. To those who worked with her, Engelbert was no rookie. She'd been a crucial factor in expanding the WNBA's alliances and improving its visibility. But behind that corporate gloss, there was always talk of control, of narrative management. And when Caitlin Clark burst onto the scene, bringing record ratings, packed arenas, and a spotlight the league had never experienced, control became tougher to maintain. Clark's arrival didn't just invigorate the WNBA, it altered it. Suddenly, every storyline focused around her. Every headline mentioned her name. She wasn't just a player, she was the product, the brand. And that presented an issue for Engelbert. Behind the scenes, executives started talking in anonymous terms. They told of a commissioner who was becoming more and more concerned about the league's increasing reliance on a single star. There were rumors that Clark was becoming too dominant, that other players were being overlooked, and that her presence was overpowering the team element. Had it remained in marketing meetings, that notion would have been innocuous. However, it didn't. Rather, it allegedly crept into the referee prep session's subtle warnings, the officiating game notes, and the tunnel chats. What started out as annoyance over hype evolved into policy. Don't give the flops any rewards. Don't make the calls for her. Make her do all the work. And let them slide after she absorbed severe blows. It wasn't about preventing Clark from being successful. She needed to be careful not to give the impression that it was too simple. And she was doing precisely that. Despite the defenders covering her, the lack of calls, and the cheap shots, Clark continued to score, pass, and lead until she was unable to do so. Fans realized it was more than just bad luck when Clark eventually suffered a quad strain. Hit after hit, week after week, they had observed the accumulation. The bruises, the nonverbal cues, and the times she turned to face the referee and received no response. The climax wasn't the injury. That was the outcome. At that point, everything started to fall apart. Several referees started speaking up behind the scenes, discreetly and under protection rather than in public. They talked about a culture of enforcement by silence, in which some referees were driven out for voicing concerns and others were elevated for following the rules. According to one official, he was told simply, "Call it tight for everyone but her." Another explained how game reviews, which were initially meant to enhance officiating, had evolved into punitive measures. A referee would flag Clark if he granted him too many free throws. Nothing would happen if he allowed her to be thrashed without a whistle. It had purpose and was methodical. Fans were working on their assignments as well. Online footage collections revealed blatantly ignored missed calls, shoulder blows, body checks, and arm grips. Some were written off as being a part of the game, even though they had gone viral months earlier. They now presented a distinct narrative and context. The WNBA made an effort to remain strong. No admission of wrongdoing or public remarks. However, Adam Silver had already intervened, and his action completely altered the situation. He wasn't merely preserving the integrity of the sport when he suspended Engelbert. In the sand, he was sketching a line. He was clear. The WNBA's events have an impact on the whole basketball community. Furthermore, he refused to allow a possible scandal to topple the entire system. The consequences were instantaneous. Sponsors began posing queries. Updates were required by networks. Players who had previously been reluctant to talk started to do so. One of Clark's closest teammates, Kelsey Mitchell, spoke with tact but clarity. She stated, "You've got to protect your stars," in a post-match interview. "Because if they fall, what are we really building here?" Veteran voices like Charles Barkley stepped up, criticizing the league of carelessness and raising doubts about whether Engelbert's personal control anxieties had put the WNBA's future in jeopardy. Even Clark made public remarks despite being ignored. "I wish to receive the same treatment as everyone else. Receiving calls when I'm fouled is part of that," she stated. "I've never requested preferential treatment. All I want is justice." It was a composed, professional, and measured reaction. However, the frustration was evident underneath. But the harm had already been done. The most marketable star in the league had been the aim. The commissioner was accused of organizing it all, and the referees had cooperated. The whole WNBA scene was staring into the mirror as the dust from the commissioner's suspension continued to settle. This was no longer merely a dispute. As additional officials came forward and internal records found their way into the hands of investigative reporters, the league was forced to face the consequences of its actions. The image grew more distinct and unsightly. In private and under confidentiality agreements, some referees said that they had received communications urging them to refrain from overhauling fouls, let the game breathe, and in one instance, don't save her. This is all about Caitlin Clark. However, it was the suspended referee's own words that finally broke the hush. There was a flurry of theories. If the WNBA had finally admitted that there was a problem, was this merely damage control? If so, it would have stopped there. Another low-key scandal that was forgotten till the following sporting event. Suddenly, a name, a transcript, a leak, and an internal report that was never intended for public consumption were making the rounds on the internet. The substance is damning, but the source is unverified. The banned referee reportedly acknowledged in private that league officials had pressured him not to call certain fouls, particularly those involving high-profile games. Additionally, he was paid in at least one case to control the flow of play when Caitlin Clark was on the court. Cathy Engelbert, the league commissioner, the leader, the decision-maker, and the sole individual tasked with upholding the WNBA's integrity, is the name associated with that pressure. All of a sudden, this had nothing to do with a missed call. Caitlin Clark wasn't the only person involved. There was a top-down conspiracy involving control, power, and influence. The sports industry collapsed. The story was taken up by national news outlets. Supporters wanted explanations. Players, particularly those close to Clark, started talking more openly than ever before as coaches were questioned about things they weren't prepared to respond to. Engelbert, meanwhile, said nothing. Furthermore, that silence was more powerful than any press release. The league made an effort to stay afloat. PR agents put in